have to be afraid of anything, cause you know the truth, and the truth is love, yes it is. Wasn't what they said to you, or anything that you learn from a book or from the news. It's not like that, cause it's a thing. It is something that you do.
Welcome to the Bassline. Steve Bennett is an artist and an IT specialist who has done unique work in the realm of linguistic forensics. He also filed an historic lawsuit against his former employer, the Federal Reserve. Here to talk about those items and more, I'm happy to welcome back to the Bassline my friend, the inventive Steve Bennett. How are you, Steve?
Hi, Jeremiah. I'm doing well. It's good to be here. Thank you.
Great. Well, really glad to have you on the air today. And I think we should get right into the historic case that you just concluded against the Federal Reserve. And I'd like to know what your takeaways were from that experience, but also give our listeners, if you could, just sort of an overview of the lawsuit and what transpired.
Yeah, sure. Great. Thank you. My lawsuit was, I'm getting just a little bit of echo, so I'm going to try to turn it down there. My lawsuit actually included a tort element and a FTCA and civil rights, and named the HHS and the Federal Reserve. And kind of my takeaway, it's been so interesting before and after COVID. I think it's changed us all. The dust is kind of settling. There's a lot of takeaways, a lot to learn. First of all, I didn't want to file a lawsuit. That's the last thing I wanted to do. I tried to find legal representation. I was working for the Fed, and the vaccine mandate came through. I was waiting for the FDA approval. When they announced the approval, I was watching closely and noticed that they were fraudulent in their representation, the legal distinction of those pharmaceuticals. So I politely requested medical exemption for a legitimate reason. Doctors know even to do that. They denied my exemption request. I even kind of called their bluff. I said, if you can find me an FDA-approved vaccine, I'll accept it. I didn't want to, but I knew that there wasn't one available.
Steve, are you a little bit far away from your microphone? You just sound a little bit far away from your mic. I can hear you, but it's a little bit quiet.
Let me turn that up. I'm getting just a little bit of echo, so I was trying to turn that down.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries. I'm going to try.
Yeah, that sounds much clearer somehow.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Sorry about that.
Go ahead.
I tried to get help, legal help, and none. Probably our expert voice on that topic right now is John Bedouin, talking about how difficult it is to actually sue anyone, but let alone the federal government. Could not get legal help. In fact, it was one of the early demoralization experiences that I had when the attorneys would laugh at me when I was asking them for help. So I took it on pro se. I learned how to do filings, pleadings. I was very creative with my case. Creativity is not rewarded in the judicial system. So I had a really good, interesting legal theory. I thought, anyway, the court didn't know how to deal with it. But it was through the Western District of Missouri, because I was working remote for the Fed, lived in Missouri when they fired me. It was dismissed without prejudice. I took it to the appeals level, the Eighth Circuit, which is the same panel that Biden versus Missouri came through. And it was affirmed. So the case is done. There's a slight possibility that I could rework the FTCA element and beg for equitable tolling, but it's been a long time. This really isn't about me. I just feel like it would be a consuming thing with very little chance of success. So I'm redirecting my efforts another way. An interesting thing is, if you have active litigation, you basically cut off any communication with your representatives and senators. They won't talk to you about it. So that's what I'm doing now is turn toward, I've drafted some legislation modeled after the military remedy and provided that to my congressperson and working with them to sort of socialize that. So there's a lot of people that were harmed in a lot of ways. And so that's kind of where I am with it now. I feel like, at least the case has got it on the record, and I can move on from here, I think.
Right. Were you the only one from the Federal Reserve to take any legal action? Were there any other officers of the Federal Reserve that took any stance that you're aware of, that against the mandates, that is?
I am aware of at least one other person who succeeded in an EEOC claim. They had a religious exemption. The main reason I didn't have a religious exemption is because we were told that those wouldn't even be considered. So I really didn't think about that very much. I went the medical route, but he did prevail. He was fired and did prevail. I found that in the public record. It's a pseudonym. I don't know who the person was. It was a law enforcement officer in Washington, D.C. There was another case that was interesting I found in federal court. It was a remote worker, high position, an analyst of some kind, that his exemption request was neither approved nor denied. They just ignored it, and they left him work remote. And eventually he came back to the office, and he didn't like the way he was treated when he came back to the office. So he had a civil rights case against them. But so we see at least 3 different treatments within the Federal Reserve. And, it's interesting. I had to explore, I really had to evaluate as an analyst. I try to think about my own psychology, my own feelings and, experiences. And it really tore me up to get fired by the Fed. I've never been fired in my life. I was performing well. It was the best job in the world. I hated it. I didn't want to do that. They put me in a position where I had no other choice. It was a duty. When I saw the fraudulent, mechanism, I couldn't agree to that, or I felt like I'd be violating my oath. So somebody was going to violate their oath, and it wasn't going to be me.
Right.
But when I step back and look at my relationship with the Fed, it's interesting. It's kind of bookends. It's ironic. They hired me. They called me. They found me to help them fix kind of their blind spots after the mortgage crisis of 2008. They missed signals. So that's the reason that my job existed. And then while I worked there, eventually, they fired me because I pointed out their blind spot. They were missing a signal, and they couldn't have that. So I thought that was kind of ironic and interesting.
Yeah, indeed. So I want to get back to this really fascinating work that you've done, and we discussed it in our previous interview, which is what I term, I don't think you've used the term, but I call it linguistic forensics, in terms of your scouling, your scanning, your probing of the internet, particularly obituaries, and observing and documenting language changes that occurred after the rollout. I would like to know, for one thing, what is the status of that work? And if you could sort of imagine if you had a level of support for that work, let's say, if you had all the resources that you could possibly dream of to really pursue that in full, what would be sort of a larger project that could be done in that domain?
That's an interesting question. Thank you, Jeremiah. I've always enjoyed discussing these studies with you. I consider myself a citizen science sort of. I was an artist, so I'm just curious about the world around me.
Yeah.
And during the COVID era, the gatekeeping and the difficulty in getting, fresh, accurate information was troublesome. So I just kind of looked around at what available public data I might be able to use to see if I could see patterns, directions, trends. So that's why I did that work. I am interested in language, through the encoding of meaning into language. And I have not done much since that. I think I did a couple studies in 24 and 25, and they're still published. By published, I mean they're available on the web. They're not peer-reviewed or anything. And I think the message I'd like to share is just, that there's data around us all the time. As you mentioned, we used obituaries. I looked at word uses, the prevalence of different words in obituaries before, during, and after COVID. And as a proportion, of the number of obituaries that we see. And we see changes. We saw definite shifts around that. There's other people that I think have done really interesting work. So I didn't really feel like carrying the torch down that particular study area. I think of Albert Benavides and Dr. Mark Crispin Miller and others. So I've been watching their work and kind of keeping tabs on it. It's funny, though, you asked, because just the other day I got curious and I was wondering about teachers. I don't remember why, but it triggered the question. And so I just went out and did just a very brief, cursory study. I looked at teachers in Missouri in an age range of 50 to 60 and just counted the prevalence in the obituaries, and then looked at that against the population of teachers, estimated population of teachers overall for those years. And it's not conclusive, but we see an upward trend there, and it's rather dramatic. So I'm going to go back and look at that more closely and just see. But, just want to advocate the idea of data fluency, logic fluency, literacy, however you want to think about it. But I think of data analysis sometimes like spray painting the invisible man. There's just data points all over. How can we use those? And what can we do with them? To answer your question directly on what would I do if I had sort of unlimited resources or strong support to just do that, it's interesting. I mean, the technology is changing, so I'd probably have a slightly different answer today than I would 6 months ago. I think about AI quite a bit, and we may talk about that a little bit more, but I've had on my drawing board what I call software, I'll call platform, a linguistic analytic narrative distiller, sort of a truth machine that could take in all forms and sorts of claims and break them down into syllogistic components, and then basically run logic tests on the encoding of the meaning in the words. So, 6 months, a year ago, a couple of years ago, that I imagined that as a kind of a brute force programming type of effort, but with the LLMs and the AI, that looks different today, and that may be a kind of a use case for something like that. But what I would work on, I'm not sure, but what I would work toward would always be the same, and that's clarity, just making sense out of noise.
Right. Yeah, it's really fascinating work, and I think it's a really important category of evidence as we continue to investigate these matters. I was just on the way to the studio. I was reading your Substack article, which is really impressive. So I want to, first of all, direct everyone to Steve Bennett's Substack. That is Steve, Steve, Bennett, Bennett, and look him up on Substack. He has a modest 41 subscribers right now, but he really needs to get more attention for the type of research and the type of thinking that he's doing. And he has this really impressive article that I just enjoyed called Occam's Paradox. And I would love for you to kind of give us an overview of that article and also just tell us about what we can look forward to in
Sure.
from your Substack, which I'm excited to see that continue to develop.
Well, thank you, Jeremiah, and I appreciate the comments on the article. I have not written a bunch or published a lot on Substack. I want to do more, and ultimately, I'd like to aim toward a book and use Substack to help develop topics, themes, chapters, maybe. I'm not into Substack for necessarily, to make money, obviously. I think it's a really interesting platform for independent journalism and citizen journalists. And I want to give you props as well for being active in there. You inspired me, and I want to write more. I'm going to write more. Occam's Paradox, as I named the article, it's not technically a paradox. But the idea is that if you need too many Occam's razor explanations to explain what you're seeing, there's a problem.
Yeah.
And that's basically what the article walks through, is several different dimensions of the COVID response, the pre-planning, the actions during the response, and kind of the cover up and the gatekeeping and everything that we've seen since. So it just lays out a plausible connective tissue or roadmap to think about how an orchestration of response might look, and would maybe prompt questions of what we really ought to be doing now. It's a tough suggestion to swallow, that there was a global coordinated response, and it was not in the interest of citizens. But that's kind of the proposition of the paper. And hopefully more to come soon. I've got several kind of ideas for newsletter editions, but like I said, I want to kind of try to channel that toward a book that basically rolls up the experience that I had with the Federal Reserve, the federal government, going against the Department of Justice in federal court, and leave that for the record of history as well. One thing I want to say about the Substack idea, and there's other platforms I think emerging too, but Substack's kind of the big one. I really want to advocate for this independent journalism, citizen journalism, and I'm proposing that everyone, to the extent that it's possible, I know times can be tough, but try to work into your regular household budget a line item for independent journalism. Maybe Substack or something else. But I think, if millions of people were to do that, I think it would have an amazing effect. It would support independent journalists right off the bat. Mm-hmm. But people would be sort of nudged into being conscious about the information they're curating and then they're procuring. And scarcity adds value. So if I have to choose between all these possible newsletters, I'm going to look for quality content and reward that. So that and some kind of lesson, music lesson, chess lesson, something like that. Put it in your budget and grow it over time.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that so much, Steve. And I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, there's so many thoughts I have on that subject, but one thing that I'm trying to convey to people is that we are in an exciting new age, a new period of information sharing. There are a number of great independent journalists and citizen journalists, whichever term you prefer, that are out there doing some really great work, and it needs to be supported. And I think the extent to which we can uplift those platforms, including your Substack, including my Substack and this radio program, and any number of other great sources of information that come to mind. Some of my favorites include The Last American Vagabond with my friend who's been a guest on this program, Ryan Christian. James Corbett, The Corbett Report is one of my favorites. Haven't interviewed James yet, although I'd love to get him on the air at some point. But there's so many people doing great independent journalism, including many of the dissident doctors who were outright censored during COVID, who were sort of compelled into journalism and then turned out to be pretty darn good at it and have now continued to produce content. And we should all be excited about that. We can now get our information straight from the horse's mouth. And it's also what we call the open source media movement, whereby the news conveyors, purveyors, what have you, are not engaged in a unilateral dialogue. They're not just speaking at you. They can be communicated with. You can send me an email. You can send me a note on Substack or DM me on X and address anything that I've said. If I left something out, if there's a typo, if there's anything, you can notify me and I'll be happy to correct whatever I got wrong or to address whatever issue maybe should have been addressed but was not addressed. And it's a more equal sort of exchange as opposed to this sort of information raining down from above, where we see this sort of holier than thou sort of approach to information sharing, and a very strong reluctance to ever issue a retraction. I think about people like Rachel Maddow, who proclaim that once you get your COVID injection, the virus stops with you. And then that turned out to be totally false. Has she ever issued a retraction for that statement? I don't think so, not to my knowledge. And, so many other examples of gross misinformation that was conveyed by these powerful news sources that many people have come to call legacy media, or you could just call it corporate media. But if we realize that corporate media is a big part of the problem, then we need to disconnect from it. Like literally don't watch. I think people should stop even taking on this attitude that, they're watching to see what the system has to say. Just ignore them at this point and spend that time supporting the independent sources. And, also we have to really uplift these sources. I have to say, for example, on previous guests I've had who are sort of new to Substack, more or less, someone such as yourself, or one of my recent guests, Becca Joyce, or another guest that comes to mind is Dr. Seema Nanda, who has a nascent Substack. As independent journalist supporters, we need to jump in there and help spread the word, help give some of these intelligent people a jump start and uplift some of these platforms from having, like in your case right now, 41 subscribers on Substack. Hey guys, get in there, subscribe for free right now, share the link with others when you're done subscribing. Let's get Steve up to 100 subscribers and then 1,000 and 10,000. I think as we see these independent voices rising in visibility, that means that a real change is happening. But right now, the way things are going, and I don't mean to be pessimistic, but just realistic, I see a lot of accounts, including some of the larger voices, you might say, people with significant followings. The feedback and the response to some of this outstanding work indicates that this is still a fringe issue, if you will, or it's something that's being sort of looked into by this small percentile of people. And we really need to expand all of that. I want to see the larger voices, the more well-known figures in medical freedom get even larger, and I want to see the small accounts get pretty large in their own right. And that means more and more people are engaging with this material, and more people are becoming aware. Because actually that's something that we discussed in our previous interview, Steve, which is just that it's so important that the people understand what's going on. We can't leave it up to scientists to do things on our behalf, or hopefully get a good politician elected who will hopefully do something good on our behalf. We really need the people to start understanding as well as they can. And actually, on that note, I'm going to just pause quickly to go into the ways that you can support this program, The Bassline. And before I do that, I'm going to invite you to call the station. The number here is 888-874-4888. 888-874-4888. Please call and get in the queue. We'd love to hear from you. This is live radio. And when you call in, you create that beautiful live radio effect. But let me just run through some of the ways you can support The Bassline. First of all, as you know, I'm an affiliate to frontierfarm.com, and that's FRONTIERPHARM.com. That's farm with a PH, frontierfarm.com. And your discount code there is The Bassline, capital THE, space BASSLINE. And they are the leading distributors of chlorine dioxide products, which I've grown to enjoy very much. The toothpaste is fantastic. The mouthwash is fantastic. Skin care, wound care. Definitely check out the catalog over there. Really good products, and you support this program when you use that discount code, The Bassline. Also, IPTV is an incredible television system. If you're paying a cable bill, you don't need to get IPTV. You have 50,000 channels, including television, from all around the world, all the news, all the sports you could possibly enjoy. And the website there is privateiptvaccess.com, and the code there is Hosea, capital J, capital HOSEA. And, of course, subscribe to my Substack, jeremiahhosea.substack.com. And please check out my new article. It's called Circles. It's some of the vaccine injury and death that I've witnessed personally in the different circles of my life. And I would love for you to check out that article, share the article, like it, and please share some of your own testimony. There's some of that in the comments section below, but I'd really like more for that article to be sort of a reference point where people can commiserate and share some of their observations in terms of all the injury and death that's been inflicted since the rollout. And of course, my music is available at jeremiahhosea.com. Please buy the theme song of this show, Love's the Highest Truth, at jeremiahhosea.com, or get my first album that I ever produced, which is sort of an indie underground classic called No One's Slave. And then last of all, I am a chess teacher. So please take me up on signing up for a lesson. I'm a very experienced chess coach, and I specialize in breaking down the game for inexperienced players or people who are total beginners. I'll teach you from scratch. If you've never learned how to move a pawn, we'll go through things from the very beginning, and I'll provide you with resources to help you on your chess journey. Also, if you are connected with a homeschooling organization of any kind, I'd like to do a lot more of that. I've worked with some homeschoolers, but I'd really like to support homeschoolers, and I'll certainly arrange a discount for that. So those are the various ways that you can support this program, and every little bit of support really, really helps. Of course, I have 2 young children that I'm raising in the politically and economically hostile environment of New York City. So back to our discussion and back to our outstanding guest, Mr. Steve Bennett. Steve, what are your thoughts about, and I'm asking you as a tech specialist, as an IT specialist yourself, what are some of the thoughts that you have about AI? Because we see, AI is just all the rage now. Everything is AI. You get an AI inquiry, even if you didn't ask for one. You turn on Zoom. It's do you want your AI companion? You know, you go to do what used to be a regular search on Google or whatever, and AI says this, that, and the other thing. If you didn't even request an AI inquiry or whatever, it's automatic now. And I had an interesting experience recently. I might have conveyed this on the air, but I was on the road and I was watching a basketball game before we headed over to sound check, and I was looking up how didn't the Spurs beat the Knicks at one point this season? Because my bandmate said, "Oh, the Knicks have the Spurs number." I said, "Well, the Spurs beat the Knicks as well. I think they're 1-2 against them," and that was my memory. But I looked it up, and AI said that the Spurs were 0-2 against the Knicks. And I said, "Well, I really don't think that's right." And then I checked another AI system, and it said the Spurs were 2-2 against the Knicks. I said, "But they only played 3 times," and I was like, I really don't think either of these are right. And I went through the whole schedule of the entire season, and I was right. The Spurs were 1-2 against the Knicks, and somehow my memory was better than 2 different AI systems about a simple question. So aside from all the other potential problems that I could think of off the top of my head, one basic problem is AI is not necessarily right, and people are always assuming that it is. But what are some of your thoughts about AI and the direction we're going in terms of this whole AI society that's emerging?
Well, I love that story. It's so good because it kind of encapsulates so much of the picture. You know, the first thing I'd say is AI has been with us for quite a while, mostly in the background. Even a credit score is kind of AI, just about. And now it's pervasive. Like you say, involuntary. Sometimes we don't even know that it's there. I love your story about the basketball. That's my basic thought, is that I expect AI is probably wrong. That's my starting point. I've never been a fan of outsourcing one's thinking. So even before it was so easy to do, I don't like the idea of letting someone else, tell me what to think, or provide the conclusions without the reasons. So, I've always been one to kind of interrogate the question, I guess. So with AI, it's no different. The interesting thing is, though, you had some heuristics. You had at least something that told you to question that. You could have doubted it. You could have known better. But you at least, you questioned it. But then it caused more work for you. And for a period of time, more confusion. It didn't fill your request for some time. You didn't have the answer for a little while. But how many AI answers do we not know what our blind spots are, or to even question them or check them? So we go confidently wrong. So in that sense, I go back to, and just let's ring fence this with the type of AI that we're human interfacing with the AI. So not the stuff that runs in the background or the agentic. That's a whole other conversation. You have robots assigning jobs to other robots. Very interesting. Other policy concerns. But, for this scenario, we go back to the fluency and the discernment and the literacy, grammar, rhetoric, logic, being able to spot fallacies, biases, because the models, the LLMs, the AI models are built by someone who thought something somewhere sometime, and then it's all mashed up. So I think responsible use starts in the way you think about it, and trying to do use context, step kind of sideways and think about just thinking in general again, no AI, the humility of a person who genuinely wants to learn versus someone who wants to be right.
Right.
And imagine those two people interacting with AI, and person one, it spits out a flattering answer, is a great idea, you're right, you're a number one. And a person who wants to be right may be prone to kind of take that and run. But if you have some humility, a person who wants to learn is going to be actually wrong most of the time because you're learning, right? We're figuring things out. So same with AI. I encourage one technique I do is adversarial questioning. I'll have multiple AIs argue my question back and forth. I get an answer that I like, and I'll give it to another one. I'll say, shred this argument. Tell me why it's bad. Because I don't know what my blind spots are all the time. So, I think AI is good. I think it's just a tool. I think there's a lot of hype. I do think that there's new kind of maybe a little bit of flavors of risks and extensive risks. You want to make sure if you're a CEO that you understand what's happening and who's responsible for it. I mean, you can't outsource your thinking. And I think it's going to kind of peak, quite frankly, a little bit. I'm interested in data centers. It's interesting to me that we don't have an environmentalist outcry about the AI data centers and power and water consumption that goes with them.
Good point.
It's insane if you've not looked into that, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah,
that's the other thing. Yeah. So I think ultimately we'll probably end up in something like a quantum AI. Well, I don't know how all that will work, but it will be different a little bit than what we have now. One thing I'd like to share on my timeline that I mapped, it feels familiar again. I went through two different kinds of transitions like it. The first one was printing. I was in graphic arts and printing for my first education and career. And I joke, but the technology at that time was actually closer to Gutenberg's technology than it is to what we were working with at the time, or what we have today. When desktop publishing came in, and we had a lot of dislocation, that's what they called it, desktop publishing. Before then, you couldn't typeset a flyer. You couldn't typeset a bumper sticker at home. But all this was democratized. And it was disruptive. But for the most part, professionals got, better and more refined, and it didn't take away everyone's job all at once. And what you ended up with was a whole bunch of stuff out there that looked kind of like ransom notes, because people would use every font on their Apple IIe's, to all 12 fonts that they could on one flyer. They didn't know how to design. It didn't make them a designer. It made it so that they could, make ugly stuff fast. But you know what? It was good enough, and they didn't care. So that, yes, it was disruptive, a dislocation, but it kind of added and flattened out, and it really didn't pan out exactly the way the people were afraid it would. The next one was around data analysis and the democratization of data visualization, kind of with tools like Tableau. There was a lot of enthusiasm in the mid-2000s, I think, late 2010s, about people being able to see and understand their own data. And that's what got me to the Fed, was doing that sort of work. Could take large data sets and interrogate them, analyze them, see the patterns. We saw the same thing. All of a sudden, it didn't make someone a good analyst. They could get a hold of the data. If they weren't careful, they'd average the averages and then sum and rounding errors. And, it didn't make them a good analyst. It made them fast, and they were kind of pretty. The dashboards looked good. Some of them looked like ransom notes. But the analysts got better and more refined. The amateurs kind of still hack away at it, but it's disruptive, but it kind of flattens out and moves on. So I see AI a little bit like that. I mean, it's neat capabilities. I try to use it. It's very helpful. I think it's just really important to stay conscious about it. I don't like gatekeepers, kind of back to the whole idea of the Substack articles and the independent journalists. We saw the trouble. I mean, media is just one of the policy areas where over centralization leaves us at risk. And the centralization and control of the media did that. We couldn't get access to good information. So
yeah, another thing about that is, once people have lied to you so severely, it's just not intelligent to trust them anymore.
Exactly.
I mean, a little misunderstanding here or there, okay. But if you're trying to lead me down this road of self-destruction, well, why would I continue to take your advice or even listen to you whatsoever? I want to mention, because we got a call that someone wanted me to repeat the website, so I'm just going to do that really quickly, and then we have a call on the line. But frontierfarm.com, that's farm with a PH, so FRONTIERPHARM.com, that's frontierfarm.com. Private IPTV Access.com, that's private IPTVaccess.com, JeremiahHosea.substack.com, JeremiahHosea.com, that's JeremiahHosea, 2 H's in the middle, and RemoteLearningChess.com. So again, those are all those websites where you can support this program. And notice, I'm not just asking for money, I'm asking for work, or you could get good products that I myself enjoy. I would never promote anything that I myself don't enjoy. So please consider those different ways of supporting the show. And now we want to go to our caller, who is Karen from the lovely state of Maine. How are you, Karen? Thanks for calling.
Yes, good afternoon. Oh, I'm getting feedback. But anyway, I just wanted to say that you didn't mention your 528 event.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so glad you mentioned that. So yeah, go ahead. I'll announce that when you're done with your call.
Okay. So when is it?
It is actually, and it's good you mentioned that specifically because it's May 24th. Normally it's the last Sunday of the month, but it's going to be the second to last Sunday. So not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, and that's at 274 Lenox Avenue. Please join us. We aren't guaranteed that location. So, I'm really trying to make use of a nice venue, a nice place where people can meet, and don't take for granted that it's going to be there forever or that we'll have access to it forever. Please join us. And I'll be playing from the heart. We have Kevin Nathaniel on mbira and percussion. We have Hassan Bakar on African percussion. And we always have wonderful special guests. So please check out this very unique band, this unique music project. And it is tuned to the divine 528 frequency. We're moving away from Rockefeller tuning. But thank you so much for reminding me of that.
Yes, and one other quick comment. I just wanted to say to your guests and to you, stay in the fight, because he's lost the case, but he won just the war because he was in the war and he fought to the best of his ability. And same with you. It looks like dead ends, but in truth, as long as you're in the fight against wrong, you've already defeated it because you've exposed it. So tell him don't be discouraged and to meet every fight head on, because if you are quiet or silent in the presence of wrong, then you're condoning it. So I appreciate both of you.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. That does mean a lot, and I totally agree. And, for me, this isn't just a hobby or a thing that interests me. This is a fight for survival. I mean, it's sort of like if you're inside your house and there's evil people pounding at the door and you're getting ready to defend yourself. That's sort of the feeling that I have about what's happening in our society. I mean, they are aggressively moving forward with this biosecurity agenda, with the central bank digital currencies, with the social credit system. And we're already seeing these things play out in real ways. It's not a science fiction, theoretical sort of situation anymore. These things are happening. And if we continue just being consumers and being distracted with entertainment and corporate news and all that, we're ill-equipped to respond to what's happening in the real world in real time. So, yeah, this is the fight that I think we can't back down from.
And the one said,
Oh, Karen, you're kind of rubber banding. Could you say that again? I can't hear you.
I said, forewarned is forearmed.
There you go.
You have already won because you see it coming, and you can arm yourself accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Karen. I appreciate your call.
Okay. Be strong. The battle is already fought and won.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And another thing I didn't mention, which I'll mention now, is we are going to have our End All Tyranny space tonight at 9 p.m. on X. You can find me at EarthDriver on X. And we're going to be hosting the Bassline Extra, where I hope that Steve can join us again tonight, and we can go into further detail about some of the things that we've discussed here, and perhaps go into further detail about the Occam's Paradox article that he's written, which I think everyone should read. He goes into some really good detail in this article, and he connects some dots, which I haven't seen connected elsewhere, and he points out a lot of important organizations, documents, events that occurred. It's a really, really good article that needs to be circulated. So please, again, subscribe to Steve Bennett on Substack, and please join us tonight on End All Tyranny. I'm looking at Steve's Substack. He's still sitting there at 41 subscribers. Could someone heroically go to Substack right now? You could go to substack.com, search for Steve Bennett, and it's so easy to subscribe to me or to Steve or any of the other voices of health freedom by simply going to an article, and right there you just enter your email address, and that's it. You're subscribed. You don't have to give a credit card number or any other kind of personal information. Just enter your email and you are subscribed. So please, let's uplift this courageous voice who's on the air with us right now, Steve Bennett. And Steve, I know you're working on some projects, different projects. So without letting the cat out of the bag, or without disclosing anything you're not prepared to disclose right here, can you give us a little bit of a hint or a little bit of an idea of some of the really interesting projects that you have underway at the moment?
Yeah, thank you, Jeremiah, and thanks to Karen. That was a very encouraging sentiment. I appreciate her calling in. What's fun now is I consider myself a semi-retired free agent. So I'm really enjoying things. If you see me working on something, you can rest assured that I want to be doing it, because that's pretty much how it is. So, I have some really interesting projects. I spent some time working with deep tech, AI, blockchain around healthcare. We've got some national defense stuff even going, and doing some litigation support for other kind of an interdisciplinary analyst. So really enjoying just working on some individual cases. But my favorite project right now, and I'm really excited to talk to you about this. This is one of the first times that I'm telling the world about this. I'm working with a team who's directly supporting Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano. And for any listeners who are not aware of him, don't feel bad. You're not alone. Most people don't. He's got an interesting timeline. At one time, he was a governor of the Vatican, and he's in exile right now. He's been canceled, excommunicated by the church, and he really speaks our language against tyranny. He basically called out corruption in the Vatican. He's an Italian archbishop, 85 years old. He was raised in Italy, so he knows Italy. He knows the Vatican. He rooted out financial fraud and made enemies within the Vatican. So for his protection, I'm making air quotes, he was dispatched to the United States. Washington, D.C. is what they call the Apostolic Nuncio, who's basically the ambassador, the Vatican's ambassador to the United States. This was in 2011 and 2011 through 16, so through Barack Obama's term. Well, he observed corruption in the D.C. diocese and called out that corruption and caused a fracas within the church. He believed that the reports he was delivering to the Vatican were getting to the Pope, and the Vatican has its own system, government. Well, they were not. They were not doing anything with its reports, and so he felt in 2018 that he had to write an open letter calling out the corruption in the church. He basically says, we know there's a deep state. He says there's also a deep church. They're similar in tactics, some of the same people. And his position is that the modern church is a usurper, that the Pope is not a legitimate occupant, and he's been cast out and canceled because of that. Well, he has a worldwide movement called Familia Christi that he's supporting. And this is the work that I'm doing. We're going to help with fundraising and awareness. I am not Catholic. I'm Protestant. But the Archbishop, he says the modern church is a usurper, and he'll work with anyone who stands, against it. So out of 1.4 billion Catholics on the planet, less than 1% are aware of this going on. In the United States, there's about 52 million Catholics, and barely any more awareness. It's a low awareness. People just don't know what's happening. Within the Catholic Church, for those who are aware, the supporters versus detractors kind of comes down the very similar lines as our United States political picture. So we're in mid-flight right now. There's tension. The Archbishop is trying to work with the Pope and reconcile this sort of excommunication. It was not a formal excommunication. And so there's kind of controversy about whether that's even valid. But in the meantime, there are hundreds or possibly thousands of clergy around the world who've been canceled or kicked out of the Catholic Church because they've stood against corruption. And that's what this movement is all about, is helping them have, a place. We're going to try to help support them. And we don't know what it lies ahead exactly, but this is perhaps, a time like, Martin Luther, or there's a very large division or schism between traditional Catholicism and some of the more progressive liberal infiltration in the church, which has gotten very extreme in some cases. So, without getting into the politics side of it, although it mirrors what we're seeing, we just need to understand that Archbishop Vigano is late in life, and he is standing strong against the tyranny of globalists. He's very outspoken about the COVID response, very specifically outspoken about it. So, I'm excited to be on his side and helping him in his mission. Something to look out for is over the next year, while this conversation goes on, I'm going to say, look for in the Mel Gibson film, the sequel of The Passion of Christ, comes out in April of 2027, about a year from now. And over that time, I think there's going to be more and more awareness about the different views and what they mean. Just this week when we saw these hearings in the Senate and what our intelligence apparatus has done in the middle of our COVID response, it's not going to get better. It's going to get worse. as we learn more and it confirms more of what we already thought, and we're going to learn some new things. It's going to get interesting. And we'll see where it goes. But so Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano, look him up if you're interested. Learn his story. Pray for him. Pray for us, and those that we're trying to support. One of our main goals is to make sure that his writings and his speeches are preserved and archived permanently. So
that's outstanding. Yeah, we're almost out of time here. We only have a couple minutes left. But I want to thank you so much, first of all, for joining me here this afternoon, Steve. And again, I want to encourage everyone, please subscribe to Steve Bennett on Substack. Please subscribe to me on Substack as well. Please check out my latest article called Circles, Volume 1. And if you can, please join us tonight on End All Tyranny. That's our online community of health freedom fighters. And we have great guests and a great audience, and we'd love for you to participate. You can tune in just to listen, or you can grab a mic and share your thoughts or your experiences, and that will be tonight at 9 p.m. on the X platform. And again, you can find me at Earth Driver. So if you get on X, just in the search bar, put at Earth Driver, and if you go to my profile, there will be a circle around my profile picture with a little microphone, and you click on my profile picture, you'll be invited to join the space. So please join our community. We're almost 600 members strong, and we're looking forward to tonight's conversation as well. So everyone have a great day, have a great weekend, and we will be back next week with another outstanding guest. And thanks again, Steve Bennett. Everyone, take care. Be well.